begin with a blessing. Hi, Rich. So would someone care to recite a little blessing over the study of Torah?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam,
asher kiddushanu
b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei
Torah.
Torah.
Amen. So if you hear a blessing and it's full, or you enough of it to understand who's saying it, and you know the person is reliable, you can get full credit by saying Amen.
Amen.
So just a few words about Amen. You know that it comes from the same root as emunah, to be firm. Lahamin is to set up. So that's a way of just saying, I'm confirming it. But if you like to play Hebrew games, it's also the beginning letters for the phrase El Melech Ne'aman, God sovereign, God the loyal or established or permanent sovereign.
Okay.
Okay, just so you should know. And we'll be talking probably next week a little bit about Amen when we get to it.
Oh.
So I want to welcome everyone again, and I'm going to now go into screen share. So let me do that. And since we did do the review, the sort of the summary of the lecture of this tractate from Steinsaltz at the end of last week, if I remember correctly, I'd like to begin by just reading through the entire Mishnah. So we'll get an idea of some of the main themes. And after we do this, either later in this hour or in the beginning of next hour, we'll start off again with the first Mishnah. So it's Perek 7, Mishnah 1. As you know, the Mishnah is, just to review, that collection compiled by Yehuda Hanasi in the beginning of the 3rd century in Zipori, which is sort of the summary statement of the teachings of the Tanaim. And for the most part, it is basically a collection of short statements of Jewish law and practice. Sometimes there's a touch of a story, often not. And we've met lots and lots of the rabbis from this period, from the period of the Mishnah, the ones who are called Tanaim. And again, just to review, the rest of the Talmud, the second part, the Gemara, is a commentary explaining what's going on in the Mishnah. So we all know that. That's just a review. Again, the teachers of the Mishnah, they're called Tanaim, from the Aramaic version of the Hebrew word to teach. And the rabbis of the Gemara are called Amoraim, those who are talking or discussing. So here it is. I'll have someone want to read. We'll read just very, paragraph by paragraph, just so that we understand. So, who would like to read right here?
I'll read.
Yeah.
This Mishnah sets out the essential halakot pertaining to the invitation to recite grace after meals, after a joint meal. Zimun? Okay.
Yeah.
3 people who ate as one are required to form a zimun and recite a grace after meals.
Okay. So what is the concept here? What are things we need to know? What words are important?
That if 3 people eat together,
Yeah.
it's so what happens if you're eating alone?
Well, if you're eating alone, you still have to recite Birkat Hamazon.
Mm-hmm.
But here we have a group. Things change when you have a group.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we know that already in terms of Jewish prayer. You can pray by yourself, but if you pray in a group, if you form a minyan, a prayer quorum, the nature of the prayer changes in certain ways. So if you're in a synagogue, we want to have a minyan to say certain prayers. And those are the often prayers that include the praise of God. So one usually would not be reciting a Kaddish prayer if there isn't a minyan, because that's a prayer in praise of God.
Oh,
One would not be reading Torah in public if you don't have a minyan. One doesn't have the summons to prayer, the Baruch Hu, if one doesn't have a minyan, because there isn't a community large enough to summon to prayer. So we need 10 in contemporary non-Orthodox Jewish practice, 10 adult Jews. And that includes little adults, people on their way to adulthood, post the age of puberty. Yes, Tula.
do they have to have been bar or bat mitzvah? Or
everyone, being bar and bar mitzvah is really easy. Living past puberty.
Okay.
That's all it takes. There's nothing, no one is bar mitzvah.
Okay.
There's no, you can't really have an adult bar or bat mitzvah, because once you reach puberty, you are a bar mitzvah. And it's what we do is not making someone a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, or what we do and all the fuss we make is sort of celebrating the fact that someone reached this age.
Okay.
So that's really need to keep that in mind. So you're about, whether or not you were called up to the Torah around your 13th birthday, whether or not you had a big party, it doesn't matter. You're a bar or a bat mitzvah. It's very disappointing.
No, maybe we should give a different designation in this modern world to adults, and I'm using quotes, bar or bat mitzvah.
I would like to call it continuing Jewish study.
I like that better.
Or review of basic Jewish information, Judaism 101. And then you celebrate your graduation with a siyum, with a party, because that's classic when one completes a designated period of Jewish study, whether it's reading a Masechet from the Talmud or another Sefer. One gets together and has a party that summarizes, that is a siyum of everything that happened. The siyum is so important that it overrides some fast days, such as the fast of the firstborn before Pesach. So that's the only thing. So I don't bar mitzvah anyone. If you make it past puberty, you're liable. Think about reaching a voting age.
That's a good example.
That's basically what it is. It's an age of maturity. And what it is in the Jewish tradition, it was about the time that people would finish their elementary studies and you would prepare for adulthood. Most most young men at that point, having learned reading, writing, and arithmetic, and able to participate on a fundamental level in the prayer service, would be sent out to learn a trade. So you might be sent to be an apprentice,
Mhm.
where you would serve the next few years until you had enough skill to make a living, and then you would get married.
But
Oh.
that wasn't what happened with the females. If they finished their elementary education,
If they finished their elementary education, they would be kept around for a couple years and then get married.
okay,
Remember the traditional way of handling teenage sexuality? You know what it's called?
Room Springer?
Marriage.
Oh.
mar-
You know, people got married earlier. No, we think about people now, most of the people we know are getting married in their late 20s to their mid 30s.
right.
And people have been then sexually mature for 15 years.
Mhm,
You know, that changes everything.
certainly.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
so the just know this is sort of a common thing. How do we control it in the past? Well, we got them married. On the other hand, people, you know, it was important because people didn't live as long.
True.
The other thing is, this is just a fun historical fact, has nothing to do with anything, but you want to know why so many stupid decisions are made by leaders in medieval and early modern history?
Or
Yeah, they were all young adults. You know, when does the brain, become fully mature?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that. But here we have three people, so we defined what the zimun is. Now the Hebrew word is chayavim lizamein. Lizamein is basically to invite. Hazmanah is an invitation. Lahazmin today is to invite someone to a chagigah, to a party, to a celebration. But here it is a specific calling, an invitation. We know the words halachot, this would be the rules. And the basic line is three people who ate as one, shalosha she'ahu ke'echad, chayavim zamein. So you have three people. So what are the things we're going to have to figure out in this Mishnah? There are a couple things that we have to understand. One is, what is eating? How much do you have to eat? What do you have to eat to consider it a meal?
Hmm.
You know, if walking around having popcorn, is that a meal?
no,
If you share a Snickers bar, is that a meal?
no.
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 So that's one thing they need to define exactly what a meal is. Then we have to what does it mean to be ke'echad, as one? Is that a conscious decision? Is it just because you're sitting at the same table? How do you form the sense of one, being a group? And
I
then
think that, isn't it an invitation? So if you were invited to someone's house,
it could be an invitation to someone's house, but let's say you're at work and you go to the lunchroom and you sit down and you take out your bag of lunch and you eat your sandwich, and sitting next to you is someone else, and that person takes out their bag of their lunch bag and eats something else, and you're busy reading the paper or checking up on your emails, and they're checking up on their emails. Are you eating? You're physically together, but are you eating as one?
okay.
What
No.
happens if you're sitting together with separate food bags, but you're gossiping about office politics together? When are you eating alone next to, when is it parallel play and when is it working together? So you want to figure that out. You're also going to have to figure out who are these three people? Is it any human being, or is it a specific class of people? No. You know that answer intuitively, what that's going to be, but you still have to define. We have a couple things just in this. We have to figure out why three. We have to figure out what it means to eat, what it means to eat together. And finally, we have to understand what is, once we have this lizamein, what is this zimun? What does it consist of? So the first thing is one who ate proper foods. So would someone like to continue?
I'll read.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
If among the diners one ate doubtfully tithed produce, demai,
Yes.
the first tithe from which its temura was already taken, or second tithe, and consecrated food that were redeemed and therefore permitted to be eaten.
Okay, so one of the things are we have to eat proper food. So we know something about the tithing system of ancient Israel. Or do you want me to review that just quickly?
You can review.
Okay, this is not the most exciting stuff. So I'm going to get out of my share, let's see, my share screen here, and I'll put another one up. Okay. I just had it up there. Well, let me go here. And what we don't know, the tithing, I'll go here. I'll end this share screen. And then I'll go back again. And I'll go here. So you should see the tithing chart. It should say biblical and rabbinic tithes, right?
Right.
Okay, so we have, I summarized this from something in My Jewish Learning, always a good website to go to if you have any Jewish questions. You don't need a rabbi these days. You just need some good, reliable websites. But we have a number of different tithes. The first donation was called terumah. And it means to lift up. And this was, terumah comes from grain, wine, and oil. Hi, Cindy. And it's given to the Kohanim. And it's basically a voluntary donation. And as we can see here, the rabbis said, you give what you want. If you're generous, you'll give 1/40th of your produce. If you're just sort of an average person, you'll give 1/50th. And if you're sort of cheap, you'll give 1/60th. But you have to give a little. And this was given to the priests. And this was holy food, the terumah. This was dedicated to the sanctuary. And the priests in their households could eat of the terumah so long as they were ritually pure. This is a holy act. It's in some way a sacrifice, and this is one of the ways that you support the priesthood. Then they had a tithe, and that was called the first tithe. The tithe is Hebrew word is maaser. It comes from the word for 10, and that's on agricultural yield, and that goes to the Levites, and that is to support all the Levites because they did not own land in the biblical distribution. Now, the Levites are also supposed to give something to the Kohanim, so they have a terumat ma'aseh, that the Levites give 1/10 of their stuff to the priests. But don't worry about that. Then we have ma'aser sheni, and that means which is the second tithe, and that's used when you go to celebrate in Jerusalem. So this is sort of putting away money for your pilgrimage. And what one can do is one would take the second tithe and convert it to money, and then money could go to Jerusalem to celebrate. Then there's the Maaser Oni, the poor tithe, so that every 3 years, instead of giving the first tithe to the Levites, you gave the first tithe to the poor fund, to the poor. We have all these tithes and a couple other terms that are worth knowing. And they show up in the Talmud. One is tevel, and that is agricultural yield that hasn't been yet tithed. So we don't, someone's going to tithe it soon, but it hasn't been tithed yet. And then something called damai, and that's, we don't know whether it was tithed or not. So these are all issues. Now, all these pertain only to life in the land of Israel. There is another kind of tithing called Maaser Kesafim, which is on our income, and that's sort of our voluntary contributions. So that when you get your call from the synagogue, when you get your call from the Jewish Federation, or any other charitable organization, that would be considered Maaser Kesafim, your voluntary charitable contribution. So, just to review, we have Terumah, first tithe, Maaser Rishon, second tithe, Maaser Sheni. And if it hasn't been tithed, it's called Tevel. And if you're not sure that someone took at least the Maaser Rishon, the food is considered damai. Does that help?
Yes.
So just keep this in mind. You need to know it to understand what's going on. It doesn't have a lot of practical significance for Jews living in the diaspora. It has some interest for Jews living in the land of Israel, and there are people who still are trying to who still try to follow it to some extent. But that's a whole different issue. So we're not going to go into that today. So, have I lost everyone? Put you all asleep yet?
Nope.
Okay. Back to our Mishnah. So, if you ate the food you were supposed to eat, you can say the grace after meals and form a zimun. And you have to eat a certain amount of food. How much do you have to eat?
An olive size portion.
An olive size, just a nimble if you do it sort of part of this group. And they said even the shamash, the person who is serving, if he joined the people just for a snack, if they said, "Here, fella, come on, taste this, it's so great," and he eats it and says, "Oh, great, wonderful." And who can do it? Well, all Jewish men, obviously. And then we have this other guy, the Kuti, the Samaritan. So you're having dinner, and you have your two Jewish friend, you have your Jewish friend, and then you have your Samaritan friend. And you're eating together. And you can ask your Samaritan friend to join the zimun. So who are Samaritans? There are a few left, and they still have their community centered around the city of Shechem, Nablus, on Mount Gerizim. Do you know anything about them?
No.
So,
Well, I know that I learned about them from Torah. I don't remember, but they had certain things that they adhered to that were different from the
Yeah.
regular.
So the idea is that this is their origins, as people sort of briefly, as are traditionally understood, after the dissolution of the northern kingdom of Israel and the dispersion of much of its leadership. The Assyrians moved other people into the land of Israel, the northern kingdom, and they settled there. And they picked up the spiritual traditions of the Israelites who were living there. So they picked up the Torah traditions and their sacrificial, some of the and the worship traditions. They never entirely merged with the Jews, the Judeans, and early at least by the early Persian period, they were in some sort of rivalry, in some way both claiming to be legitimate heirs of the Torah tradition. And in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, we see some of the early political conflicts between the newly revised Jewish community centering around Jerusalem and other groups connected loosely to this tradition, including Samaritans. They developed very much parallel ideas in the ancient period, and their temple was in this period, and politically they formed a separate unit. They revolted against Alexander, so they were harmed during the early Greek period. After the Maccabean revolt, the Hasmonean kings destroyed the Samaritan temple, which was considered a rival on Mount Gerizim, a rival to the temple in Jerusalem, the one that we celebrate that was rededicated. They lived, for the most part, sort of between Judah and Benjamin, that is the Jerusalem area, and the Galilee, and had mixed relationships with the Jews. So they liked each other and they didn't like each other. They didn't, from the Jewish point of view, they were sort of close but no cigar to being members of the covenant. We see some discussion of Samaritans in the history books, such as Josephus, how they related to the Jews during the period of the revolt. There are stories about Samaritans in the New Testament. Jesus encounters them in his wanderings, and they're part of the community. But they're not entirely Jewish. The small group that remains now is centered around Shechem, and they celebrate Passover still with a traditional sacrifice. They have a version of the Tanakh, of the Torah, which is slightly different than our version, and they preserve it in not the Assyrian block script that we're familiar with, but in a form of the ancient Paleo-Hebrew script. In this period, the question is, how close are they to be considered part of the community? And right here, we see that, at least in the time of the Mishnah, they were considered tied closely enough to the Torah and the Torah traditions that their blessings would be good enough. So if you're eating with a Kuti, a Samaritan, that person is good to join the Mizumah. Later on, they became further up. The two communities became further apart. We have found Judean synagogues, Jewish synagogues, and also Samaritan synagogues throughout the Mediterranean diaspora. That's a lot about the Samaritans. So here we have someone who's on the fringes of the community. So these are liminal people. They're not Gentiles in that they're totally out, but they're clearly not fully Judean, that is Jewish. So who can't eat? Would someone care to read here? This
I
is
can
sort of-
read.
Yeah, thank you.
However,
One who ate, do you see it?
yeah, now I do. However, one who ate untithed produce, tevel, and first tithe from which its teruma was not separated, and the second tithe and consecrated food that were not redeemed.
Okay, so this just tells you if you ate anything that doesn't fit, you can't be part of the mezuzah because you're eating something that you really shouldn't have eaten. And you have to eat the right amount of food. And here, this is interesting. Want to read that?
And the Gentile who ate with two Jews, none of these people is included among the three to obligate those with whom they ate in a zimun.
Okay, so the Nokri, the non-Jew, doesn't form the zimun. Can a non-Jew form a minyan?
No.
No. Is that discriminatory?
Yeah.
Is it bad discrimination? To discriminate is not necessarily bad. Is it a bad thing that a Gentile doesn't form a zimun?
No, it's not bad.
Okay, why not?
Because they're not knowledgeable and understanding what the procedure is or how they're not bound to the Torah.
Yeah, they're not part of the community. It's okay to say you're not part of the community. No, people are allowed to join the community. This is actually a big question today when we have any number of people who are connected to the Jewish community, but they're not fully Jewish, they're Jewish adjacent. And how do we fit in the Jewish adjacent person?
Well, what is a Jewish adjacent person?
Think about it, someone who's part of our community but not fully committed to being Jewish.
Are they Jewish to begin with?
Intermarried.
An intermarried person. We have a number of people in our synagogue who are intermarried. That one partner in the couple is fully Jewish and the other is there and supports, but has not joined the Jewish community in a formal way. Or someone is they're moved by our services and they just like being the folks in the community. They may or may not be connected romantically or legally to a Jewish person, but just like the community and hang out with us. And they have lots of people like that, or even maybe a person who is moving to become a full member of the community, but hasn't completed the entire process.
But the issue is it says obligate. So we're not saying you can join and eat with us and say the prayers. What this is saying is that you're not obligated to do it. Right?
That's actually a good question. Are they obligated? And if it's not obligated, can it be voluntary?
I don't see why not. I mean,
okay.
You don't have to do it. It's just like, the issues with women and timing, right? They don't have to meet the times, but they can.
But there's a difference here. The difference is they're not obligated, but let's say it's one who's not a member of the community, but you have the other two, it looks like they're not obligated because you don't have a zimun.
That's right. They're not. So,
Right.
yes.
Right.
So, but it's an interesting question. I'm glad you brought it up because we'll see later on in the Gemara, they're going to be talking about voluntary and obligatory.
Okay.
Here, the idea is, that's a translation word. If you look at the Hebrew, I don't know if everyone's Hebrew is so great here, but It's much shorter. It says, V'hanokri, and the stranger, Ein ma mizabnin alehem. So
It's not, yeah.
one does not invite them in. So it's, the English is translated here as none of the people, and a Gentile who ate with two Jews, none of these people is included among the three to obligate those with whom they ate in a zimun. So the English, I think, is pretty clumsy. And the Gentile, well, one doesn't invite them to join them. One doesn't call the person to join. But that is it is a really interesting question. That's what these two things, Gentile and Nokri. How close are you to be into the community before you become participatory in the life of the community?
Now, to me, that's interesting though, because if they're not, you don't have them join you, does that mean not only that they can't be, they're not counted in the formation of a zimun, but that they cannot eat at your table?
Obviously, they can eat at your table because they're there. They've eaten with you.
Yeah, it says who ate.
Yeah, it's all right. And this is assuming that you've eaten. Do they count for, so you can have table fellowship with them?
Mm-hmm.
But it goes two ways. Do you say a blessing? Do you say amen to their blessing before eating? And two, for the Birchat HaMazon, which is an obligatory mitzvah on Jews, do you invite them to form the prayer minyan to say Birchat HaMazon? And apparently Kuthims, the Samaritans, are close enough to the community that they would feel obligated. Remember, they also have the Book of Deuteronomy, and they still have the Achalta V'Zavata Uvarata. That's still part of their custom. So are they there? Are they close enough? And the Gentile, even the one who is on the way to becoming a member of the community, is that person obligated? And you force him to be obligated. And does this person have to say it? Because once you invite a person to say zimun, it's not to the zimun, you're not only saying, to recite, let us pray, but you're also saying, and now you have to sit down and recite these 4 blessings with us. Can you make that demand on a person who is not yet part of the community?
Doesn't sound like you can.
Yeah, but these are the questions that the Gemara is going to have to answer.
Mm.
Okay.
So the Mishnah tells us lots of things, but it leaves things out. So who's in and who's out? Now, what about these other guys? We like these guys, but how do these guys fit in?
Only full citizens. I don't like the sound of that.
Yeah, well, I don't like the sound of it either, but there were different levels of participation and citizenship in the ancient world, not only in ancient Israel. And it was a gendered society.
Yep.
And it was a hierarchical society, as ancient Mediterranean society and Near Eastern society was.
I mean, we've had discussions as a synagogue. I had been to one of the congregation meetings early on, and there was a big discussion and then vote on whether or not someone who is not Jewish can serve on our executive board.
Yeah.
The answer was no.
It's part of the same question.
And yet you could be on the executive board, on the board, and not be Jewish.
Okay, that's a way of dealing with it. The question is how invested you have to be in the community before you can take a leadership position in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a question. It's a good question. I mean, we need to have, how do we deal with borders? How do we deal with boundaries? And that's always going to be a Jewish question of any community.
We run into that issue when it comes to the choir. If the choir is singing, the choir is obligated to sing things that support the ritual.
Yes.
As opposed to something that does not. So when it comes to a solo, a person singing a solo is in a sense leading prayer.
Yeah.
By that definition. So it becomes an issue to make sure that we have somebody Jewish taking a solo.
Yeah.
Even though the choir is open to any congregant.
And, as I see it, part of it also has to deal with the nature of the words. If you're asking a person who is not yet Jewish to make a verbal commitment to loyalty to the Torah, or loyalty to the mitzvah system, or loyalty to the Jewish people, and they're not ready to do that publicly, that's really not fair. And that's really important, I believe, from a Reform perspective, because conversion in the Reform tradition, the Reform Jewish tradition, is not so much a series of specific rituals. It is really a public declaration of membership in the Jewish community. That's how you basically have converted to Judaism in Reform Judaism. We've never insisted on the rituals, particularly the ritual of immersion and the ritual of circumcision. Not that most Reform rabbis today will strongly suggest these, and will encourage people to undergo at least mikvah.
Right.
But that's not seen as obligatory, or hasn't been seen as obligatory. It's basically going up in the congregation and saying, I want to be a member of the community. I accept the rules of the community upon me. I take upon me, all Malchut Shemayim, the yoke of heaven, and all HaMitzvot, as understood by the community, the yoke of the mitzvot. So, big question. So, how much do you have to eat? We have a question here. So then they have these other people. So it says, Nashim, Avadim, V'Katanim, Ein Mizamnin Aleha. So you don't invite women, slaves, and minors. Those are different categories in the hierarchy of the Jewish community. So if you think about the ideal community, at the top there were Kohanim, then come the Levites, the Leviim, then come Yisrael, all the Israelite men, then all the Israelite women, then all the Israelite children, then all the slaves, who are also part of the community, but they're have different social status. So, and women, slaves, and minors do not have the same obligations as male Israelites. But then again, women in Rome did not have the same rights as men in Rome. Women in the classical Greek cities didn't have it. I mean, it's, this is so against our world, and that sort of throws lots of things into consideration. But this is the ancient world.
Right.
So.
Well, where do the Kohanim wives, or Levite wives, where do they fit into this?
Well, they have, so long as you're a member of the family, so let's say with eating terumah, the Kohen can eat terumah, that voluntary gift. His family can eat terumah.
Right.
That would be his wife and his children, his male children, who are going to be Kohanim, and his female children, who will, until they are married, can eat terumah. When the priest's daughter, a Bat Kohen, gets married, if she marries another Kohen, she'll still be able to eat terumah. If she marries an Israelite, she won't be able to eat truma. But if she has to return to her father's house because of divorce or death of the husband, she can be part of the household again. So it's, yeah, again, this is, we, even in most traditional Jewish practice today, the status of Kohanim and Leviim are, it's only honored basic in things such as the order in which people are called to the Torah in a traditional synagogue. First the Kohen, then the Levite, and then the rest of the Aliot are left for Israelites. And then when we have egalitarian stuff, it gets sort of funny. We don't have to go there right now. So we inherit a lot. So we have this, how much? An olive bulk, except for Rabbi Yehuda, who says an egg bulk. But it's not a lot. So this is the fun one. Does someone want to start reading number 3?
I'll read.
Yeah.
The Mishnah delineates distinctions in the halachot of the zimun blessing based on the number of people present. How does one recite the zimun?
Okay, continue. For 3 people, Judy.
In a group of 3 people, the one reciting the zimun says, "Let us bless the one from whose food we have eaten."
Yeah,
In a
so
group of
3,
in a
yeah.
group of 3 people and him, I guess the one reciting the zimun says, "Bless the one from whose food we have eaten," as even without him, there are enough people to recite the zimun. With the increase in the number of participants, the blessing is more complex.
So usually it would begin, if you're going to a zimun, someone can say, Chaverai, Rabotai, friends, or even Nivarek Shachanu Mishalo. Let us bless the one from whom we have eaten. And then we all say, Baruch Shachanu Mishalo. Okay.
So the 4th guy didn't eat?
No, the 4th guy ate if you're from 3 up to 10. So if you have more than 3, you just say you say Nivarek Shachanu Mishalo, and everyone responds Baruch Shachanu Mishalo.
Okay.
So that's your basic number.
Okay.
But you got 10 guys at the table, so it changes a little. And with 10 guys, it goes. Judy, do you want to read? Or
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. In a group of 10 people, the one reciting the zimun says, "Let us bless our God, the one from whose food we have eaten."
Yeah.
In a group of 10 people and him, the one reciting the zimun says, "Bless our God, the one from whose food we have eaten."
So here we have, from just Nivarech, we have Nivarech Eloheinu. So when we get 10, we sort of make it a little bigger. That's the custom. For 3, Nivarech, and then the next one is Nivarech Eloheinu, or then it's Baruch Eloheinu. And that would be the camp version, because there are usually more than 10. Okay, now, for 100 people, you're in a big party. It goes, Nivarek Ladonai Eloheinu. Let us bless the eternal, our God. So we've now shoved Hashem into it. So just saying, Nivarek Eloheinu, Nivarek Adonai Eloheinu. Getting more and more. Let's say you get 1,000 people. I'd hate to have to cater for that. And now it gets even longer. It says, Nivarek Ladonai Eloheinu Elohei Yisrael. Let us bless the Lord our God, the God of Israel. So now we've added even more. We start with Nivarech, with 3, with 10, we throw in Eloheinu, with 100, we throw in Adonai, Hashem, and now with 1,000, we tossed in Elohei Yisrael. Oh, Rich, come on. You have a good question on here.
I don't know about that. What's the difference where it says in a group of 1,000, and then it says in a group of 1,000 and him, meaning 1,001. And it
Yeah,
did that with
basic-
all the others too.
Yeah.
The only difference is let us bless, and it leaves that out.
Yeah.
There
Well, basically, what we, so we would say, yeah, goes, Rabotai Nevarech, Baruch Shechanu Yishalau, V'tuvahu Chayinu, usually then it goes. So I think that's basically the response. You say, Nevarech, let us bless, and then everyone else says, bless. Baruch Hu, that's what I think's going on. Let's see. Let me just go back again. Be'elef, Omer, Nivarek. Be'elef for who? Oh, I know the difference. I'm sorry, Rich, that's good. In the first, if you just have 1,000 people, you just have 10 people, you say Nivarek, that is a cohort of, that he's considering himself part of the group. So you say, let us bless, because if he were to step out, you would only have 9 people. So he has to make himself part of the group to make it up to 10. Or he has to be part of the 3 to make it up to 3. But if there's 4, you don't have to say, let us bless. You don't have to use the cohortative form. You can use the imperative. Do you understand the difference between those 2 grammatical forms?
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't really do a lot of it in English. I think if you suffered through Latin, you have a difference between a vocative or cohortative. So that's the difference. If there's only 100, you have to say, let us bless. If there's 101, he can step out and you still have 100 and he can say, bless. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Actually, I thought about that and I forgot about it. So it keeps going on. So the principle is that just as it recites the blessing, so too those recite in response. Blessed be the Lord our God, God of Israel, Lord of hosts, who sits upon cherubs for the food which we have eaten. Wow. So if you get 10,000 people for dinner, it's a big deal.
It's a Hasidic wedding.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know if it's a Hasidic wedding. I don't know. Maybe it's a lot of people. So, Rabbi, does the number matter? And we have a number of voices. So Yossi HaGalili says, according to the size of the crowd, they recite the blessing as it is stated, bless you, God, in full assemblies, even the Lord, you who are from the fountain of Israel. Whew, that's from the Tehillim, from the Psalms. And Rabbi Akiva says, nope. So if you're in a synagogue, all you do is say, Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach, right? We follow Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Galil said, according to the size of the crowd, you can do like, Baruch Eloheinu Adonai Mikol Yisrael, blah, 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 blah. But no, in synagogue, we just do it. And Rabbi Ishmael, who we're actually following, we follow his full form, Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvorach, and then what do we respond? Baruch Adonai Olam Moed. Okay, so what's going on here is sort of they're thinking about, well, we may do this for the meals. What do we do in the synagogue? And then the next thing is, if you ate of one, if 3 people ate of one, can you separate to say Birkat Hamazon, or do you have to say it together?
Yeah, you have to say it together.
That's right. So 3 people who ate as one are not permitted to divide. So if you have 3 people, you can't, and you can say, do the zimun. Zimun's a good thing, so you have to do it. If you have 4 people, you still can't divide because that'll be 2 and 2. If you have 5 people, you can't divide because there would still be 2 and 3, and you'll be denying someone that. If you have 6 people, however, you can divide. So if you're 6, 7, 8, or 9, but if you have 10, you have to stick together because you've now lifted it up. So a group of 10 may not divide until they're 20. So you have 2 groups of 10. And so on and so forth. So another question they have, 2 groups are eating in the same house. So you have 2 groups, it's like in the lunchroom, and you and your pals are eating, and some other group and their pals are eating, and you're close to each other. So can you join to form a zimun? And if not, those who recite a zimun form themselves. But do you recite? Can you make one zimun? So you have your 4 friends, and the other group has another 3 people. That's
As long as they can see each other, they can.
They can. So if they're sort of like in proximity. So, but if you're sitting in the dining room and the other group is sitting in the kitchen and they're not talking or really close to each other, you have your table in the overflow service, and they're just doing it differently. Can you? Now, what about the blessing over wine? Do you say the blessing over wine before you add water to it? It's a whole different thing. How did you drink wine? Well, the Greeks in the Eastern Mediterranean, people would dilute the wine a little with water. They had very thick wine. So to make it potable, they would often add water to it. You have to mix it. I think you still see this custom in the Mass. They add water to the wine. The Romans often drank it straight, so the Greeks thought the Romans were all drunks. But so the question is, do you say the blessing before or after you make it potable? So Rabbi Eliezer says,
before you drink.
He's fancy, so he's not saying you have to make it good. But the other rabbis say, yeah, you can drink the wine any way you want. And that's it. That's our Mishnah, which is really good because it's now 12:30. So I think what we saw here, and I want to thank everyone for hanging in, is just by going over the Mishnah, we've seen some of the issues that we have to discuss, that the Gemara will pick up. And the other thing that I believe we saw is that some of these questions are still very current questions.
Yeah.
That there's still issues, and particularly, what are the boundaries of the community, and what are the boundaries of the community, particularly when we're doing community building activities, such as our basic rituals. Who's in and who's out, and where does the boundary go? We've also brought up some other topics, whether it's what's the difference between obligatory and voluntary. We reminded once again that this society is a hierarchical society we're looking into, that they had distinct gender role distinctions, and how do we deal with those today? Again, very much current problems, and how do we apply lots of this material to a radically different social world. So the Gemara is going to look at it as well. And remember, the Gemara is written in a different world than the Mishnah. It's, time, Mishnah goes up to the middle of the 3rd century, time marches on. And in the Gemara, we have voices from not only the land of Israel, but also voices from the diaspora, particularly Babylon. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Again, as always, I'm in your debt because you give me the opportunity to teach something I really love. So thank you so
Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Next week, we're going right back into the Gemara. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Be well.
Be
Bye-bye.
well.
Good, Tov.
Thank you very much for running this, Ira.
Okay.